So the task was such for Mark Ogden. Give us your best team of 2023, the calendar year, and give us the not so good team of 2023. So before we get to the Mark, just a quick word on how you went about this. It's not like they've been the best players or they've been the worst players. Injuries and various things have come into that. Is that the kind of criterion that you went based on?
Yeah, I mean, on the team of the year first, it's difficult because you have to judge on how they ended last season, how they started this season. So a lot of players, have had a good start to the season, but not so good last season. Or, certainly the case of others in the disappointing team. Some of the players I've picked had a great couple of months, no guessing who, Marcus Rashford, and a not so good 10 months. So it's a case of overall the calendar year. And you're right, there are some players who've made the disappointing team who have been let down by injuries, and it's disappointing for that reason. And some players in my team of the year are based on how well they've stepped up to the plate and how they've exceeded expectations. And some players will be thinking, why has he picked him? Because he's not as good as him. But it's because of the consistency and how they basically stepped up to the plate. So it was a tricky challenge, actually. It wasn't as easy as it might seem.
Okay, let's see if there's any controversy in this. Now, we're about to approach 2024, and some of the technological advances, AI and everything like that, it means that with our graphic, we don't have to put all the players on at one time. We can start with the defense. So let's do that for your team of the year. We're going to build some drama and suspense here. The one that I kind of thought, okay, that's an interesting one, was your left back, Dan Burn. But the more I thought about it, I thought, well, who else could it be? But obviously with a Scottish hat on, I thought Andrew Robertson. But Burn, was that one of the harder decisions that you've had to make?
Well, it was, because, like you say, you look at the potential candidates. Well, Andy Robertson's he lost a bit of form at the start of last year with Liverpool. Mm-hmm. His form was up and down. He's had injuries this year. He's not been his best, but on his day, he's probably one of the best left backs in the world. But I think this year he hasn't been at that level for a variety of reasons. You could say that Man City and Arsenal don't operate with a left back, a traditional left back. Luke Shaw at Man United's been in and out, up and down. So I went for Dan Burn because he's been a pivotal part of Eddie Howe's team at Newcastle. They qualified for the Champions League. They played in the first major final this century. He scored some big goals in those runs, but he's also stepped up to the point where nobody really thought that Dan Burn, who's really a centre-half, had it in to play at left-back. And I just think he has had a sensational year at left-back. He's really risen to the challenge. He's grasped the chance of playing for his boyhood club. And I think that nobody has stepped up and grasped the opportunity more than Dan Burn. So he's my left-back, because I just think he has exceeded expectations much more than any other left-back all year round.
Any other suggestions that you may have put in to your defence for your best players of 2023 in this team?
Yeah, well, obviously the goalkeeper might cause a few surprises. I've gone for Emi Martinez at Villa, but I think he's got such a personality and such a presence that he's been a massive part of Villa's season. The fact that they're challenging for the title, when a year ago, following Steven Gerrard's departure as manager, Unai Emery came in and they were mid-table. People say Ederson, Alisson Becker have had great years, but I think Emi Martinez has been consistent all year round. I think the fact that he's had a huge impact on his team, probably more than the other goalkeepers I mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Now let's go to midfield and look just with a little swoosh. The midfield appears. It's incredible stuff. I mean, the money that we spend on this, goodness me. I don't think we're going to give the ball away too much with this team, with Rodri, with Rice and Odegaard. We're going to have plenty of protection for that back four. Were you of the opinion that it was either Rodri and Rice to fit in another creative midfielder, or were you just simply, look, this isn't who's playing in which exact position, this is just the best players in midfield of the calendar year?
Yeah, I think, look, if Kevin De Bruyne had been fit, then he'd be the first name on any team of the year, wouldn't he? Because Kevin De Bruyne has been the best midfielder in the Premier League for 10 years, but he's not been fit. He's had a very patchy year altogether in terms of injuries. So, Rodri, as a defensive midfielder he is, he's also a great passer of the ball. He scores big goals. He scored the winning goal in the Champions League final. So he's not just a defensive midfielder. He is, he's a classic midfielder in a sense. And I think Declan Rice is blossoming into that. But Rice is obviously a bit more box to box. I think Declan Rice is your traditional, the 1980s style box to box, defends, tackles, attacks, does everything really. So I think there's a good blend there. And I think Martin Odegaard, as we've seen with Arsenal, has got such creativity in his left foot. The assists that he racks up. He scored a lot of goals. Certainly last season for Arsenal, I think he scored 15 Premier League goals. So there is a blend of real flair and durability there. So I think if I'm managing one of the top teams in the world and you give me 3 midfielders to buy, I think they'd all be in the top 5. I think that they've had great years all round.
Any potential others that might have got in there ahead of those 3?
Well, I mean, you could say that, Dominic Szoboszlai's had a great start to life at Liverpool, but, over the year, does he get in?
Exactly.
Maybe not. I think, you're looking around. I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's many that, you don't really see anybody at Man United that would break into that team. Man City have got talent all over the pitch, Bernardo Silva perhaps, but I'm happy with that 3 that I've picked.
Yeah, it's solid. Now, when I saw your front 3, which we're about to see as well, I mean, this is mustard. This really is. How do you go against this 3?
Well, I mean, I ended up having one pick because you have to pick Erling Haaland. You just have to.
Sure,
There's
of course.
no doubt about it. And you can't have a team of the year without Mo Salah. Even though Liverpool have had a tough second half last season, he always scores the goals. But for me, Son, the one thing that won it for me, the fact that, first of all, the pressure that he was under this year with Harry Kane leaving to step up to the plate. Well, he's done that this season. He also, his presence and his work rate and his tenacity were a big part of Harry Kane's, goals output last season. But you just watch Son, and I watch other players in his position, and they don't quite put the work in, or they don't track back as they should do. And sometimes they'll take a breather. He never takes a breather. He never takes his foot off the ball. And I think if you're a young kid making your way in the game, and you look at a great example of how to be a forward, it's Heung-min Son, because he just works so hard. He works so hard, and he finishes so well. Doesn't give referees too much of a problem. He's had a couple of issues in the past with late tackles, but for me, he's just a perfect forward, and he's scoring the goals, and he's showing real leadership at Tottenham this season.
I think you ended that team very strongly. And for those in the UK that remember the Churchill advert on TV with the dog that just kind of nods like this, that's decent. I remember once listening to a commentary, and I have to say I've used this line in commentary once or twice as well, about a player who was so inconsistent. He was either Pelly or smelly. Now, we've seen the Pelly team, and it's time for the smelly team, basically, the misfits of 2023. So let's bring up the graphic for the players that underachieved. And we'll start, as we did with the good team, with the back 4+ goalkeeper. The first thing I want to say is Reece James is in there, maybe not through any fault of his own, just because he's been injured and he hasn't played anywhere near as much as he would have liked. So you can talk about that, but I also want you to talk about the goalkeeper, because you see Manchester United, Manchester City a lot. You see Onana a lot, and he's in your disappointing team of the year. For what reason?
Yeah, I had a real I was torn on this one, because I actually think Onana will come good at United, but because I was torn between him and David De Gea. I thought I could pick David De Gea in this team because he had a terrible end to his time at United last season, a woeful 6 months, which led to his departure, really. And he doesn't have a club. But we don't know if he doesn't have a club because he doesn't want a club, he wants a bit of time out, or because he can't find the club. So, but whatever, it's not been a great year for David De Gea. But ultimately, Andre Onana came in with the pressure of replacing David De Gea. He had a great second half of last season with Inter Milan, getting to the Champions League final, but he came to United and he started disastrously. Some really big mistakes in big games, Champions League games. That United probably would have been in the knockout stage by now, but for the mistakes he made in games, certainly against Bayern Munich and Galatasaray. So he made a great save against Copenhagen from the penalty spot. But I think Onana came with such a reputation, having had a good year with Inter Milan, that he's just not lived up to it. But I do think he'll come good. But I just don't think you could pick a disappointed team of the year and pick a goalkeeper ahead of Andre Onana, because he came with such high expectations.
And when Eric Dyer remains on the bench, when there are no other centre-halves available, and Ange Postecoglou still plays 4 fullbacks across his back 4 rather than go to Eric Dyer, it's not been great. Take the hint, pal. I don't think your future's at Spurs. Cucurella and Gvardiol's an interesting one, because Cucurella came with a big fanfare but never really got involved, and especially with Ben Chilwell getting injured as often as he has, you would think that spot's Cucurella's to lose, but no, thankfully he's got good hair, because he's just had a poor 2023, right?
Oh, that's just terrible. I mean, look, it probably wasn't his fault that Chelsea paid so much for him. I think Man City were trying to sign him for half the price, and Chelsea came in and automatically put a massive lump of pressure on his shoulders. I think he had 4 managers last season, and this season started with Chelsea considering him as a loan move to Man United, but they pulled out of that one because of the injuries that they had. And he's just not been able to convince. And the last time I saw him play, he was playing at right back against Man United at Old Trafford, and he was taken off at half time. So he's a left back who can't defend, according to Jamie Carragher. And I think Carragher's got a point. So if a left back is left footed, he can't defend, and he's playing on the right and he's taken off at half time, that isn't great for Mark Cucurella. But the reason he played on the right that night, by the way, is because Reece James was injured. And just to go back on your point about the selection, Reece James is a brilliant right back, and when he's fit and at the best of his form, he is up there with,
of course,
England's vast array of great right backs: Kyle Walker, Kieran Trippier, Trent Alexander-Arnold. But I think he's had 7 injuries this year. He's already now out for another 3 months, I think, with an injury. So you've got a feel for Reece James. But if he looks back on 2023, it's been a disappointing year, a very disappointing year, and that's why he's in my team.
Okay, so in the good midfield, we have Odegaard, we have Rodri, and we have Rice. In a 3-on-3 in training against that 3, Enzo, Phillips, and Mount, yeah, it's a bit of a no contest. Enzo, again, could fall into the category of it's not his fault they paid as much. He could have ended up somewhere else. Mount just hasn't done anything at Old Trafford. And Calvin Phillips, his boss has apologised to him for his lack of game time. So 3 very different candidates here.
Yeah, well, Mason Mount is a bit like Reece James in the sense that he's had injuries all year round, but he went to Man United, he passed his medical, so he was fit when he signed, and he's just had the same problems again. And when he has been fit, he's just not performed, and he's gone from being in the England squad to being nowhere near it. So it's been a terrible year for Mason Mount. Calvin Phillips, he just, he's won a treble. I think he's won 5 trophies this year if you count the Club World Cup, but he's probably not contributed much to any of them. He started 4 games all year, so not a great time for Calvin Phillips. And Enzo, let's not forget that he had a great World Cup for Argentina a year ago, but 6 months prior to that, he left River Plate for Benfica for less than £10 million. 6 months later, he's gone to Chelsea for £105 million. So again, it's not his fault that Chelsea was so ridiculous in the transfer market, but by paying such a fee, they put a huge amount of pressure on his shoulders. And he's a good player, Enzo, but he's nowhere near that. He was at the time the most expensive player in the Premier League's history, and he's not that player. Declan Rice has gone to Arsenal for a similar fee and been outstanding, but he's a bit older. He knows the league. I just think Enzo is just suffering for the fact that Chelsea signed him on the back of a good World Cup and paid way over the odds for him, and I think it's difficult for him to succeed at that level.
I wonder if Mudryk thinks to himself, well, I've given it away, who's in your front 3 now? Mudryk is one of them. I wonder if he thinks to himself, I wish I'd gone to Arsenal instead of gone to Chelsea. Or maybe it's another that might come good. Rashford's an interesting one. I want you to talk about that one because he had a really good season, or a decent chunk of the season last year with Manchester United, but can't even get into the team right now. And Anthony, ever since I read someone describing him as a YouTube footballer, I can't get that out of my head. That's your front 3.
Yeah, well, let's start with Marcus Rashford. He had 2 fantastic months, but he's had 10 terrible months. And, in the recent weeks, he has been so bad for Man United that he's been dropped from a front 3 that is not very good. The front 3 right now that Erik ten Hag's been using in the last couple of games has been Alejandro Garnacho, Rasmus Højlund, and Anthony. And all 3 of them are very, very raw forwards who haven't got a lot of goals this season. So Rashford can't even get in that team. For me, everything is wrong about Marcus Rashford. His body language, his commitment, his performance at Newcastle recently was so bad that he was taken off, and we haven't seen him start a game since. So, Rashford needs to look at himself, really. He's 26, he should be at the peak of his career, and he's letting it slip away. So he makes this team, despite his great 2 months, he's just not done it for the rest of the year. Anthony, again, you're talking about players that can't really dictate how much clubs spend on them. £85 million for a player that is utterly one-footed, not very quick, not very strong. As we record this, he's not created an assist all season. I don't think he scored all season either. So he just doesn't do it. He's just a player that he's not good enough for Man United. He's not good enough for the Premier League, and I'm amazed that he gets in the Brazil squad. But he's simply not good enough. And I think whenever there's a change in the hierarchy at Man United in terms of the Jim Ratcliffe takeover and the football directorship and the football control, I think Anthony will quickly have to find a new club because he's simply not good enough. Mikhailo Mudryk, I think there is something there in Mudryk. I think there's a player there, and I think that with the right coaching and the right faith, and I think Mauricio Pochettino is slowly getting something out of Mudryk. But as you said, at the start of January, he was going to Arsenal. He was telling everybody he was going to Arsenal because he kept liking their games on FIFA, and it never happened. And then he went to Chelsea again for an inflated fee, and moved to a club in chaos with managerial uncertainty, and he's not been able to settle. And I think also with Mikhailo Mudryk as well, which we have to factor in, which I think gets overlooked. He's come from Ukraine. His first move abroad. He's a young lad, and he's got, despite the fact he's struggling on the football pitch, what is his life like off the pitch? The worries he's got to deal with, family worries, his country's in an absolute turmoil right now. So the fact that he's been able to perform at any level is amazing considering what he's come from. So I think Mudryk needs a bit of patience, but ultimately he's not had a great year on the football pitch, and that's why he's in the team.
Yeah, plenty of debate to be had. One thing I would say about a fair number of those players in your disappointing team of the year, it's not really their fault that they've paid overinflated prices for a lot of them. And it's like Harry Maguire at Man United being that $80 million defender. It's not easy for some of them. But if they've got that ability that a club's willing to pay that amount for them, as you say, you might have expected a little bit more. Mark, thank you.